Hello and welcome back to the Soul Tree Diaries. My name is Martine Shelley and today we are going to be exploring the missing fourth trimester, the missing hibernation, the missing winter of life. In previous chapters we have been discussing the 4 seasons, the brain transformations that we go through. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most foundational and important stages of our brain development in life, and that is what we go through in the 4th trimester. You see, as mammals, we are born earlier than we should be due to us becoming bipedal, standing up on 2 legs, and our pelvis is not having the space to birth the size of our brains. So instead of carrying for 12 months, we carry for 9, which means that when our babies are born now, they are born with their brains at 25 to 30% developed, which means they are massively underdeveloped. But before we go in and explore this 4th trimester, the hibernation and the winter season of pregnancy, let's just have a quick look at the wild information around this, because we know in nature we have herding animals. We have the horses, we have the goats, crikey, we can go on, the rhinos, the elephants, sheep, all these herding animals where when the babies are born, their brains are actually at a developmental stage of 80 to 90% developed. They are born with their senses intact, their eyesight, their muscles, their legs. They can function within their body because they are herding animals, so when they are born, they are ready to follow the herd. And then we also have denning animals, denning mammals, your dogs, your cats, your foxes, your lions, your wolves, all of these denning animals where their brains are not quite born as developed, and they all go into a hibernation period following a birth, at least 100-day period following the birth, where they remain in a hibernation with their mothers, hidden in the den, being held by Mother Earth in the soil. There is not a single other mammal that would go into those dens and remove their cubs or their babies and take them out into the world. They're simply not ready for that. And they're so underdeveloped that they are vulnerable in their current state. So they're hidden out of sight from the predators and from the family to keep them safe. But whilst the mother is in the den, who is keeping her safe? That wider family, that village, that generational home that surrounds the den, that surrounds that portal of life, is keeping the mother safe while she sits in her den. She does not hand over her babies to someone else to care for. She stays there with them. And if she needs a rest, she will have a trusted nanny who she will allow to keep them safe if she needs to depart the den for any reason. And as humans, we are the same. We are denning animals. So let's just have a look and just take a little walk through what's actually happening in the den and in the brain of the baby, the cub, when they are in that stage of their development. You see, when we're born, we have that one part of our brain that's still online, that amygdala, that back part, that baby part of our brain is online when we're born. And when we're in our den, when we're in that safe environment held by Mother Earth, with the protection of the family outside, something really special is happening inside that den. Our environment is safe. We are being nourished. We are being nurtured. We are being loved and cared for by the mother. That nourishment that the mother brings through her breast milk is one of the most important foods that we will have during our life. You see, there is nowhere else in nature where you will naturally find a food that has a high fat content and a high sugar content. Colostrum and breast milk is the only naturally occurring food on planet Earth that has a high fat and a high sugar content, and this is for a very good reason. Now this topic today is quite a meaty topic, and for many of us who have stepped into motherhood and perhaps gone through motherhood once, twice, 3, 4+ times, you may recognize that each time you went through that process, you did it differently. You did it more confidently. You did it more knowingly. There's reasons for this. But the most important thing that I want to share before we delve into this subject deeply is that there's no blame. There's no shame. And there's no pointing fingers in this game. You see, when we went through that experience ourselves when we were babies, our bodies picked up a biological experience that created pathways in our brains. So when we step into this next stage of life ourselves and step into motherhood, that's the only reference point that our body has got. And quite often as mothers, we can step into motherhood and we can feel like those intuitions, those knowings, those gut feelings that we've had all of our life, all of a sudden are silent and don't speak to us because there's perhaps some missing data, some missing blueprints that you didn't have in life. So what is the importance of this nourishment in our den? There's a part of breast milk. There's a naturally occurring opioid peptides in our breast milk. These opioids, they flood the amygdala of our brain. They flood it, causing oxytocin. Then the amygdala is the fear center of the brain, that emotional center of the brain. When we're born, that amygdala is alive. And what settles it, what calms it, what regulates it, what co-regulates that part of the brain is the touch of the mother, the nourishment from the mother, and these opioid peptides that directly connect to the amygdala in our brain, and they flood it so that it's filled with oxytocin, the love juices. And this is what literally is developing this part of our baby's brain. Once this part of the brain has been flooded with mother's milk, with the oxytocin, with that opioid peptides that come into the body and connect in the guts and just get everything going, this creates a foundation of safety in the amygdala, in the baby part of our brain. Now, research is showing that children who are suffering from anxiety, children who are suffering from high sensitivity, high sensory sensitivity, the prefrontal cortex is not as active or developed as it should be. And this can directly connect back to this experience during this hibernation and winter of life, when we should have been flooded with this oxytocin and opioid peptides coming into our brain. But if that's missing, and if we are not given that foundation of safety, of co-regulation, because let's not forget that when we're first born, we do not know that we're a separate being from our parents, our mothers. And this is where that fourth trimester, the external womb from the mother, this is where that is part of the foundation of the development of our brains. When this part is not fully developed, neurodiversities can set in and cause dysfunction in the brain development as it moves through the next stages of growth and development in our brains. How many of us were able to sink into hibernation, to hide away in a den, to nourish our babies? Or did we feel forced to get back out into the world? Did we feel like we had to carry on, get out shopping, getting out back into nature, into the spring of mothering, before the hibernation and the convalescence had complete and done its work for the development of the baby brain? Now, I do not sit here as somebody who has gone through these stages perfectly as a mother. When I held my newborn son in my arms, my firstborn newborn son in my arms, when he was 4 days old, I looked down at him, and my intuitions that had guided me my whole life were silent. And I knew that there was missing wisdom and information within. I also did not have the security and the safety of that generational home around me so that I could hide in the hibernation period of the fourth trimester. And so what followed on from that for me? My eldest son was riddled with anxiety, struggled going to new places. His sensory world was on fire because the amygdala, that emotional part of the brain, had not received the whole development that he should have done during that stage. And then he went off to school, and within 2 years, he was a broken mental health wreck who'd developed tics, anxiety, stress, and he was struggling to function across all areas of life. As a mother, this causes us such a great anxiety because we can see that things aren't right in their world, but nobody listens when we say they're not okay. Just keep churning them through. Let's get their attendance marks in. But what about the soul or the development of their brains? Who asks us? What's the connection like between you and your son? Are you able to co-regulate with him? Do you even know what co-regulation is? Nobody asks us these things. They look for labels and diagnoses, which are helpful in those systems, yes. But they don't help to fix the pain in our hearts or the suffering we go through in our homes. And so when our firstborn son was 7, we took a big step in life. The school system wasn't working for him. It was breaking his soul and breaking mine. And so we brought him out of school and we began home educating him. But we all have a neuroplasticity. which means we can heal and begin again. And so we went back through, we took our son back through the hibernation phase of life. We hid in a den, in the safety of our home. And we slowed life right down so his nervous system could calm. And you know, the process of taking our son back through that was quite heartbreaking, because during those years of school where he was being snatched away from me and he was suffering and he was telling me, I'm not okay, I don't want to go into school, and I continued to take him there, it broke his soul, but it also broke his bond and his trust and his connection in me. And so when we recreated this safety net at home, when I went into his room and I slept in there too, we literally recreated that fourth trimester, that hibernation, that winter period at home. It took my son 2 weeks before he would feel safe enough to be embraced in a mother and son touch and hug. 2 weeks before he felt safe enough to trust me in my mothering and my nurturing for him. But what happened once that phase was recreated and we gave space for his brain to have that environment of the fourth trimester was insane. Once he was able to be in that embrace, all of a sudden, it's like he began to come alive and his brain development started again. He started to feel safer. He was less sensory processing. He was having a lot less sensory processing difficulties at home. Now, he's 16 now. This is almost a 10-year process we've been through. But he's currently off sailing for 5 nights with people that he doesn't know, having the time of his life. And this is because we took the action to listen to what he was screaming at us. I don't feel safe in this world. It doesn't make sense. And so we brought him back home to recreate that safe space, to allow his brain to start the healthy redevelopment again. It was a huge transformation. All the tics that he picked up in school, many of the autistic traits that developed during those years, they vanished into thin air as he became more grounded in himself. He could come to me for co-regulation again. His sensory world settled. My heart was healing inside. Perhaps you recognize this within your child too. But the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that there is no blame on you. You didn't know this information before. If you don't know, you can't do what was never done for you before. This is such a big, important topic for us to discuss. It's a hard one as mothers to admit that we perhaps didn't get it right. But when we can say, I didn't get it right because I didn't know, this wasn't given to me, I didn't receive that in my home. When we can begin to acknowledge that there is a process to mammal brain development, and that if we can recognize this, we can begin to make shifts and changes to help things repair and heal, so that we can send down the line through the next generations a healthier vision of what this fourth trimester, this winter season, should look like in our homes, by encouraging mothers to stay home and rest, not holding their baby, but cooking and cleaning instead. Keep the hearth of the home warm while the mother hides in her den. This is foundational for the brain development of the next generations of your family line. Going through those years was some of the most trialing and tribulation was the most challenging years as a mother, having to face, hello Robin, having to face my own self, but also know that I did the best that I could, and that there is a way of helping to bring healing and balance back into our homes. You see, when a child doesn't receive that fourth trimester, that opioid, oxytocin flood of the amygdala part of our brain, their needs have not been met. Their nervous system is on high alert. There's no co-regulation. They don't feel safe. I had to acknowledge that I'd caused this for my child, because what then grows from that unstable foundation is a child whose needs have not been met, a child who becomes needy, a child who becomes hypersensitive to their sensory world, because the brain does not know what foundational safety feels like from the start of life. But when we go for support and help, who asks us questions about this stage of development that happened in our homes? I don't remember a single person asking me questions about the relationship between me and my child. I just remember people asking what things were wrong with him, so they could find a box to tick and a label to give. Now I know that this subject will sit heavy on people's hearts. I'm not here to bring blame or shame on you. I'm here for us to wake up. Now, let us look at some of the world data on this. Let's bring some balance and grounding into this, and know that if you recognize that that phase, that stage of development was rushed or missing for your child, there are things we can do as mothers to bring peace and redevelopment too. So, to the wild data for this, the denning mammals. In nature, we are the altricial mammals, the hiders, like the fox, the wolf, the foals, the lion cubs, the dogs. They hide at birth because they're born unfinished, underdeveloped, not ready to step out into the world. The den isn't a luxury only allowed for wild animals on Mother Earth. It is a secondary womb, an external womb, and as mammals, our young deserve this too. In the wild, no predator enters the den, no other mammal comes and takes the cubs away from the den. No mother leaves until the cub's nervous system has settled into the world. So the Western data on this, the opioid bridge, science confirms that the chemistry of the den, breast milk contains casomorphins, a natural opioid peptide. Now this is also included in formula, and whilst it's not quite the same as the human version, this is in breast milk, and it does take longer for a newborn to digest these from breast milk, but it is in breast milk too. The natural opioid peptides. When a baby suckles from the warmth of the mother, the brain is flooded with a chemical handshake of euphoria that binds directly to the amygdala. The opioid bridge molds the brain's foundation in absolute safety. Without this, the brain stays on high alert, causing a maternal hole, which often people will spend their life trying to fill with food substances that also contain a high fat and sugar content, or opioid substances that almost give us exactly what we need, but is missing the connection of a human being to fulfill that primal need. In traditional Chinese medicine, the sitting month. Traditional Chinese medicine has protected this period of hibernation, wintering, fourth trimester, for thousands of years. The sitting month. They believe the portals of the body stay open after birth. If a mother rushes into spring too early, wind enters the body, causing a hollow hearth for the mother and a restless, unsettling spirit for the child. I certainly recognised that from my eldest son before we did the healing work to help him recover. The cure is simple. Stay inside, stay warm, and stay still with your child, and see what a period of recovery does for them. In Ayurveda, in Indian medicine, the grounding, the vata. In Ayurveda, birth is seen as a massive vata event, an explosion of air and movement, which we recognise. To prevent an anxious, airy nervous system in the baby, they prescribe a sutika, sorry, probably saying that wrong, Sutikra, period. 42 days of heavy oils, warmth and seclusion. This grounds the baby's nervous system into their very marrow. They grow into themselves rather than being stuck, ensuring they grow up rooted in peace rather than floating in anxiety. Psychological and somatic data, the startup sequence. Somatic science shows us that humans have zero self-regulation at birth. This is why when you hear about babies self-soothing, this is not nature's way. Babies are not designed, denning babies are not designed to self-soothe because they do not have the capability. When they do self-soothe, this is survival, not thriving in their minds. We co-regulate with them. Our bodies function as if we are two. We support them through this stage of development until they are able to self-regulate, because their development has been solid and grounded enough for them to feel safe. We literally, as babies, borrow our mother's nervous system until we are fully formed. If a mother is forced into spring while the baby is still in the hibernation, the baby's startup sequence is interrupted. This creates a sensory processing silt, where the world feels too loud because the internal safety filters were never finished in the den. But as I found with my son, we can always go back and finish the sequencing. You hear it often of people who go back through rebirthing processes when they do this as adults on their own. Imagine the impact when you do this with your child through connection, co-regulation, and safety in your home. It literally rewires their brain and they begin to develop healthily again. Now, I don't sit here saying that our child is perfect. Of course, there's still remnants from this, but the transformation is plain to see. This hibernation period, this wintering, this is a blueprint of the human being. This is the science of our souls, and it's missing from our generational homes. When we can reclaim the hibernation, we aren't just resting. We are repairing the human race. We are helping for the neurodiversities that this missing development can cause. So perhaps if you recognize this neediness in yourself, perhaps if you recognize the over-sensory processing, the hypervigilance, the avoidance of light, of touch, of noise, of people, of crowds, of chaos, perhaps you also recognize that there was perhaps maybe a missing part of your development too. And this isn't about blame, because the previous generation can only give to you what was given to them. We can support the next generation to sink into the soil, to grow their roots, to value the hibernation period when they step in to mothering and nurturing the next generation, and prioritize the den over stepping straight in to spring. If this chapter resonates with you, if you feel the weight of this one in your soul, know that this is not on you. This is not also just on the generations before you. This is societal. This is structural. And you are not to blame. I'd love to hear from you if this one resonates. If you feel that this is actually what's happening with your child and what's going on in your home. Because this is impacting so many people in our development, in our safety, in our anxiety. This is impacting us all. Just take some time with this one, because this one might land heavy on your heart. But just remember, you did the best that you could with the wisdom and the tools that were handed down to you. Now is the time for us to bring change when we have awareness, when we know we can then begin to impact and help the next generation to grow with healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy souls, and a new knowledge of how this hibernation period, this fourth trimester, is foundational for the development of our brains. Thank you for joining me for this episode. It's certainly one that sat heavy on my heart as I've journeyed through motherhood. But we do have the ability to begin healing and repairing our stages, our growth as humans. Thank you very much for joining me today. Take care.